today. The first being that this meeting will be recorded, this webinar will be recorded, and we will be uploading it to the Collaboration Basin website as we usually do with our webinars. The second point being, please use slido.com and the hashtag MHHS to submit any questions. We will not be accepting any questions that come through either via the meeting chat of this Teams meeting or verbally. So please keep yourselves on mute, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the demo. It's important that the demo isn't interrupted as it's running. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Richard for the introduction for this webinar.
Thank you, Caitlin. Just a quick intro from me. So Richard Watkin, DIP Delivery Manager, working on the programme. Just to give you a brief idea for what we're going to cover today before I hand over to Dave and the team to start the demo. So what we're going to see today is actually the DIP portal itself. So you'll see that. We'll see the end-to-end process for onboarding from first invite through to the ability for your organisation to start sending messages to the DIP. Whilst we're still in the pit testing phase for the DIP, I know that the demonstration is a real example of what you should expect when you come into your CIT interval. As Dave and the team go through the demo, I think it's important just to note at the moment is that any reference to engagement or contact and ability to access the DIP, that will be based on your entry into either CIT or SIT functional. So just to try and mitigate any questions that might come up around that for now. And I think that's it really. Just wanted to really reiterate the point that Caitlin made, because it is a demo and we will be walking through the steps to get you as participants through the onboarding process. This is a 5-day process, so there is some Blue Peter moments that we need to get through in the time that we've got allocated. If you could please leave all of your questions to Slido rather than in the chat, and if you could leave all yourselves on mute just to help the other participants understand what's happening within the demo, that would be great. And of course we'll address the questions that have been raised on Slido at the end. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague David, who's going to run you through the demo.
Hi there, Richard. Thank you very much, Caitlin, for the introduction. My name is David Gardner. I'm the Stakeholder and Communications Manager for the DIP SP, that's Avanade. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this onboarding demonstration. Hopefully you will all at the moment be able to see the first screen of the slide deck. Just looking for a nod. Yep. And what I'd like to do is just start with quick welcome and introductions, which is, this is a pre-delivery demo, so we're working out of a pit environment which has been set up for the demonstration. So all text, copy, emails, navigation names, anything you see is all still in test mode. So please don't try and read content explicitly and feel that that's what you're going to see when you are invited and join the DIP. The second thing that I can confirm is that we're in the final stages of completing a full step-by-step DIP onboarding guide, and that will be provided to you well in advance of your invitation to join the DIP. And it really is step-by-step. It will take care of all error messages, anything that might go wrong. Everything will be in there to explain how to get through to your complete successful onboarding. What I'd like to do just before we actually get started with the actual demonstration, just introduce a couple of points. Number one, within the DIP, there are actually 4 user roles. These are the user admin, who's the main role. There's a certificate admin who, as it says, looks after the certificate management. There are 2 other roles that are not involved in the demonstration today, and they follow the onboarding, but we're not going to be touching on messaging or analytics, but there is a message admin and an analytics admin as additional roles. So in terms of the demo, what we're going to walk through first of all is the user admin. That starts with them receiving the DIP invitation. They will register to the DIP. They'll have to set up MFA. Every user will have to do this. They need then is to check the company details that have been given to the DIP team to set up and send the invitation, make sure they are correct, and they will invite the certificate admin. The second part then of the demonstration today, we're going to walk through as many steps as possible. Those that are in green are those that happen within the DIP itself. So we will start at number 1 there, which is receive the DIP invitation. So the set admin will log in from that link. They'll also have to go through their MFA, and then they will be invited to go and join the global sign process. That will allow them to receive the API details and then save that into the DIP to continue. Now, the 2 red pieces are those bits that happen outside, and we'll go through this in a second. But first of all, you have to, the information that comes back from Global Sign has to be converted to PFX. And the other very important note is that we have to complete a DNS registration. For those of you that are in the set, you should have already have seen the poster that was sent out, which was the roadmap to DIP. And that explains clearly that in your preparations before you get that invitation, make sure, very importantly, that you have discussed with your technical team, whoever owns your DNS, that they are ready to support and help with the DNS registration. Once that's all in place, we can then complete the certificate uploads by going back to the DIP, create the active certificate, and then we're all ready. The certificate is ready for use. So that's going to be the demo today, and I'm going to switch over now and show you the portal and walk through those steps that we've just discussed. So bear with me while I switch. So the first step, the user admin will have received an invitation from the DIP team, probably the DIP manager, inviting them to the DIP. The link will take them to this page and they will be asked to sign in. So if I click the sign in button, it's going to ask me for connect. I'm going to use a new set of accounts. So we're just going to get rid of this one. And in another file over here, I do have a set of usable users. I'm going to just pick this up, drop in here. Log into the portal. It will ask me just to confirm my permissions. I've accepted that. It does need more information. So what it's going to do now, and this is going to be for every user that logs into the DIP, they're going to be asked to complete an MFA. So I've got phone in hand, all ready to go. If I move on to the next, it's asking me, we're using Microsoft Authenticator today. We move to the next area. I've now got a QR code to scan. I'm setting up on my MFA a new work or school account. Set up a scan QR code, scanning the code. That's been successful. When I move on, it will now do a test of the MFA. It's popped up on my phone. I'm typing number in, and we should see, there we are, notification approved. So I've now got security control for my access to the DIP. So there we go, success in terms of accessing the DIP and setting up the MFA. Now, the first thing that does happen, and everyone has to sign this, it will only happen once when you're logging in, and that is that you have to accept the terms of use. That needs to be dropped down. You can't just click the accept. You have to open up the terms of use, which have not yet been specified. It says as test data. You have to open it up at least and scroll down. Once you've done that, you'll be able to click the accept, and we're now a registered person within the DIP. So as I said, the first part of this for the user admin is to check that the details that have been put in by the DIP manager are correct. So we can see that the company name, Energy Demo, actually it's Energy Demo Limited. So I, as a user, can now just make sure that's correct. I'm allowed to put in some company description. This is a mandatory, there needs to be content in here. So it's our company. Check the company number, that looks okay. And as I said to you, the next and important phase is that we need to invite the certificate manager. That simply is just to click this plus button, type in the name of the individual, I'm just put my own name in just now, but what's important now is that the email address is the correct email address. Now I've got a pre-canned email for this. I'm just going to pick that up from a little spreadsheet I have here, drop it in. And this is the next part. You remember I said there are 4 roles. So this is where we select the role for this particular individual. Each individual can have multiple roles. But what I suggest is we don't make any amendments or start to look at adding additional roles at this point. The key thing in the onboarding is that we assign the MP certificate admin role to this individual. As you'll also see as part of the DCP activity, we can start adding market participants, but I suggest we don't look at that. We're just going to go straight through now into onboarding this company through this certificate admin. So we're going to submit that. That email will be sent off to the certificate admin. I'm just waiting for my colleague to give me a thumbs up that he's received that email. What you can see in here is if I go to the members, then we'll see that that person that I've just invited, so that's PIT MPDE certificate 03, is my name. I can edit that individual from here, and you can see that I have MP certificate admin privilege. I can now add message admin, analyticals reader, or user admin if I wish, but we're just going to leave that for the time being. But that's the other roles that this individual can be given. I'm going to log out as the user admin. Make sure that we log out fully. I'm signed out of the account, and that's me back to the sign in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log in as a certificate admin. I'm getting a thumbs up. We're good to go. So I will go to sign in, put in this new user account. Certificate 03, as you can see there. Put in the password. Oh. There must have been. Did I just sort the password issue out? That's allowing me to request to come in here. I've accepted this. It requires the MFA to be set up. So here we go again for this user. So this is a new user being set up for MFA. We'll go through the same process as a user admin did. So I need to set up a new account. I'm going to scan the QR code. That's been added successfully. Move on, do the test. I've got my number, type into my MFA. Notification approved, move to next. And that's as successfully authenticated. Now, because of the problem that we just had with that password, this will not happen to you because you will just be using the email address that you have been invited to. Just make sure I get this right. And we will sign into the portal. Again, MFA is important. So again, I've had a pop-up here on my phone. I'll just verify that. And that shall have taken me into the terms of use. So as before, as a new user, I have to accept the terms of use. I need to drop down. You should read the terms of use. And at the end of reading the terms of use, we accept, and we're now a valid member of the DIP for this organisation. Now, what you can on screen is the standard layout of the portal. So you've got your banner at the top with your heading for the MHS programme. On the right-hand side, I've got my identifier to show that I am the certificate admin. Navigation bar sits across the middle, and depending on which user you are, that navigation bar will change. Down the right-hand side, you'll also see a number of quick links. And these, as you can see here, it's saying how to use the DIP as an MP set admin because it knows I'm logged in as a certificate admin. So each user that logs in will have a set of instructions relative to their use of the platform. At this point, as the certificate admin, we're at the early stage of onboarding. This will only happen once. I'm going to log in to the Market Participant Navigator. And down here now, what you shall see under certificates is we are at the start of the process. There's a 5-stage process here, which starts with the global sign registration. Now, the key here, and it is in the onboarding instructions, we click the link here to take us to global sign. So this is how we get started. We click the global sign and you will be taken to a global sign website page, which, as you can see there, global sign services for MHHS program. There's a little blurb here that tells you a little introduction. On the right hand side, we've got a little onboarding process guide, and this gives you details about what your journey is going to be like with global sign themselves. The important part now is that getting started with Atlas. The about you have to put in your details. So your name, surname, job title, contact details. Now, what is very, very important here is global sign need to validate this individual. That email address, it doesn't need to be an executive, it doesn't need to be someone senior in the organization, but they do have to be a full-time employee of the organization. The global sign process will include contacting the organization to verify that that individual is a valid employee before they will progress to confirming and verifying your certification. You complete all your organization details and then submit that particular document. Now, we're not going to do that today. We don't. It takes quite a bit of time. What I'm just going to do for a second is go back to the slide deck and quickly show you what happens from the global sign perspective. So there's a number of steps that you have to follow. The first thing that you get very at the start, as soon as you've clicked that submit, you will get an email through from Global Sign inviting to join what they call the Atlas application and create an Atlas account. At the moment, there are 12 steps. This is still under familiarization, negotiation, and completion, but it will look something like this. It will have 12 steps, and you have to follow them in the order that are shown, 1 to 12. Again, these are all broken down in the onboarding guide. The result of getting to stage 12 is you'll be informed by email, not by phone call. It's back to the person who registered on the Global Sign service to confirm that your certificate details are now available. That process we are expecting to take up to 3 days. We do have a confirmed that it should be no more than 3 days, but it should plan in your process of onboarding that there will be a 3-day lapse between starting the process with Global Sign and receiving what you can see here is your API key, your API secret, and the ability to download your certificate. That's where the 2 red steps come in. We have to go through a number of steps then to take that certificate and create what we call a PFX format of the certificate, which then allows us to complete the process in the DIP. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just flip back to the DIP. Just get to the right screen. Here we are. I go back up to the top of the screen here. So I'm still logged in as a cert admin. I probably have logged out. You can log back in, use your MFA. You'll come back to this screen. So we've now completed part 1 of the 5-step process in the DIP. I just need to click next now. And what it's doing is it's asking me to add the API key and the API secret that we just saw on that screen. Lo and behold, we've got a little text file here with that content in it, and I'm just going to cut it and bring it across so you can see this process complete. So I'm just going to, so your API key goes into the top box. We'll put our API secret into the second box. And then what you have to do is upload your PFX file that you've generated. So I'm just going to click on the little link here And I've got the PFX file on my desktop, which is this one here. It's called an EDIP file. I'm just going to open that. It's uploaded it, and I'm now going to validate it. So what the validation does here is this is now validating with global sign. So when I hit the validate, that is making sure that we put in the correct details. Everything lines up, it all looks correct, and we can now save that certificate into the credentials. So we've now completed part 2, so global API credentials and MTLS certificate upload. If we move on to the next area, you'll remember at the start I talked about the DNS. The DNS is a very important part of the completion of the detail to get to your certificate creation. In this domain here, we can see that this step has already been completed, but you would put your FQDN, easy for me to say, in here, and then we would submit that. So at the moment, we've already had it submitted. I'm just going to move to the next area, which is a domain verification. So the domain will have been set up. If we click on this drop down, we can see the number of domains that we have. We're going to pick the one that's relative to our organization. So a number of domains could have been set up. And when I do that, it also shows me in here a bit of detail about the various attempts to add domain names in here. But we're quite happy now. We've got the right domain. We're going to click the checkbox. We're going to submit that. And that now it actually has already been completed, but not what you would be doing is click the box, submit. The next button would appear. We'll click next, and that moves us on to the last stage required to complete the certificate signing and complete the onboarding. So the boxes that we have here, first of all, the domain name, that it is the one that we have, which is in the DNS. We're going to select that. The certificate purpose for your onboarding, particularly through CIT, is the last one here. There's an MTLS and signing. So you must select that one. The others are used in the future. As you can see, the subject name is blanked out because that has already been used in that non-DIP process to ensure that our certificate is ready for use. I'm just going to bring my text file across so you can see what I'm working with. So your text file will look something like this. Our CSR file, as you can see here, I've already used my key and my secret, and I just need to cut from the start of that dash through to the end of the dash. This is my PFX format. I'm going to copy that. We need to drop it into the CSR box and create the certificate. As you can see up the top right, these are called toasts, I believe. And we've got an update there saying that that certificate has now been added successfully. So on the screen, as you can see, I'm still logged in as a certificate admin. The certificate serial number is shown here. You can see that it has been issued. We've got a creation date and an expiry date. Who it's been created by, we can see certificate 03, which is the certificate admin login, email address. And then you've got 3 buttons over here. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the important one now is that we can download that certificate so we can start processing messages in the DIP. If I click that download, do I wish to download? Yes. We can see a little pop-up here on the right-hand side. If I click on that, you'll get to see me opening the certificate detail. It's opened up on my other screen, so I'll just drag it across. And the key things here that we're going to look at, as you can see, it has been issued to Global Sign Test Certificate. Yours will not say test certificate, it will say Global Sign Certificate. If we look at the details here, we can see if we look at serial number, 01915BB, that matches up, 0195115BF. So we know that that matches that particular certificate. Further down in the detailed information, we can see in the subject key, you should see this as a global sign certificate. Obviously, it won't say test in your instance, but those are the 2 main things that you can look at to check that that certificate is now ready for use on that particular server on that domain. If I just click OK, we are actually complete in terms of the onboarding of your organization to the DIP. So what I'll do is hand back to Caitlin, and we will see if there are any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave. Right, we're going to move on to the Q&A section now of this webinar. Friendly reminder again, please use slido.com with the hashtag MHHS to submit your questions. We've had a few come through, so I'm going to run chronologically. The first one being, is there any mandate on MFA setup? Does this have to be mobile, or are there other options available?
Hi everyone, Alan Parsons, I'm the security lead for
Oh, Alan, you're a bit quiet, sorry.
Hi, microphone to my head. So yeah, sorry, I was just saying I'm the security lead for Abernard. So MFA is required within 7 days of logging in. So the next time you log in after, so on day 8, you'd have to complete the MFA registration by then. And then in terms of methods, you do have to use a mobile in general, but you can also use mobile, so you can get an SMS or a phone call. The SMS contains a one-time PIN, and you can use that. You can also obviously use the Microsoft Authenticator app, which is what Dave showed you there. And you're also able to use other Authenticator apps, although the setup's not quite as seamless as with the Microsoft Authenticator. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Alan. The next question that we have is, can only one user per participant have access to the DIP based on the MFA requirement?
No, you could have multiple users. They'd each have to set up their own MFA when they first log in. Essentially, they will get an invite through. They click the link within that invite, and then they go in, sign in with their existing credentials, and then set up MFA after that.
Of course, it is advised that you do have multiple.
Thank you. Is the user
just as a finish to that, it is advised that you do have multiple cert users and admin users to ensure that when someone's on holiday or someone might be absent, that you do have someone who can access that role within the DIP. So get them set up as soon as possible.
Thank you. The next one is user admin NO or ADO, and what role is cert admin?
I think that's one for Richard.
Yeah, so I think in the Code of Connections document, we obviously identify the nominating officer, the SRO, the TC, and the ARO. In the DIP, you've got a certificate admin, and certificate admin is effectively, I think, the equivalent of those roles that you would have. I think the exception being with the nominating officer, as David showed earlier, when you go off to do the global sign process, it's the nominating officer's details that you need to put in there. Internal into the DIP, the certificate admin is the person, the ARO, SRO, or TC that will be managing the certificates. Hopefully that answers the question.
The next question we have, not so much a question. I think, Dave, you may have already covered this, but it would be good to briefly touch on sending and receiving if pub and rep messages.
Yes, that's all going to be part of a future webinar. We have demonstrated that to the SRO, and we had a small number of market participants engaged with us a few weeks ago to actually see that operational. But we need to polish that up, and that will be at a future date. But yes, it is all working.
Thank you, Dave. The next question is, how does this help me send a message to the DIP sim or DIP simulator?
So the DIP simulator is completely separate to the DIP. It's been developed by the program team, and contact should be via the Sims and M's team. I think everybody should be aware of the contacts, but if not, we can drop some details into this chat. But the DIP simulator and the DIP are two separate entities in this sense.
Thank you, Richard. The next question is, where in this process do you specify the SRO, ARO and TC?
I think we've just covered that one. So it's the certificate admin will take on those roles. So ARO, SRO, TC are the people who will be administering your certificates.
Thank you. Next question is, will the slides be shared? We're not going to share the slides from this specific webinar. We're going to share the recording, but we have some guidance coming up. I think Dave or Richard, you already mentioned this at the outset of this webinar, that we'll be releasing out on the collaboration base and the website. You'll see it in the clock as well.
Yeah, the onboarding process guide is in the final stages, and it really is finite detail about every single step, every problem that could exist and how to address those problems, what might happen, and it'll take you right through that whole process that we just walked through, including everything that was in the red bits, the bits outside of actually in the DIP. We're actually going to show you all the screens that you should see in the sequence that you see them in. You have to follow that sequence in order to complete the successful delivery of the certificate to the DIP.
Thank you, Dave. Next one here is, can multiple associates get the access for a particular role?
Yes. I presume that means that the assignment of the user roles that we saw on the screen, they can be assigned to as many people as you like within the organisation to give you the coverage to make sure that you've got enough people in the different roles. And as is mentioned, one individual can have multiple roles.
Thank you. The next is, could you please provide a link to the DNS setup process document?
So the DNS setup is internal to each participant's organisation. We will be issuing the user guides, which will do the step-by-step process. But of course, there are, and I think that's the reason why Dave highlighted it as such a key step, is that most organisations will have a CAB or change process that will need to be sought through. So I think it's that question is quite pertinent. So it's best to find out who the right technical people within your organisations are to update the DNS records.
Thank you. API key, is this used when sending messages?
Yes.
Great.
So the API key, the secret, and the certificate all combined.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just to be clear, I'm running through the questions chronologically.
Okay.
So apologies if it seems like I'm jumping around, but I'm going chronologically. Next one here is, can you please elaborate on how Global Sign determines a contact method of the company you work for to verify the identity of the user?
Yep, so I can take that one. So Global Sign, essentially you register with them, you give the details of your company. They then use a government database, which I can't really provide much more detail because it is a secret database, to find out the contact number for the company, and then they're able to use that to basically verify that you work for the company, or the person signing up works for the company.
Thank you. This demo, the question here is, I presume this demo is for CIT, SIT. From the outset, I think that was sort of the target audience for this demonstration. But the question here is, will there be a separate DIP onboarding process for qualification testing?
So the answer is there may be a slightly evolved version of the onboarding process, but in essence, this is the bulk of what the onboarding process will be, and we don't anticipate that will change significantly. So qualification process will be very similar, if not the same.
Thanks, Richard. The next one is, for third-party adapters to connect to the DIP, is the cert admin someone in the DIP adapter vendor? Are the vendor cert admin employee details used in Global Sign?
Can you repeat that, please, Caitlin? Just
For third-party adapters to connect to the DIP, is the cert admin someone in the DIP adapter vendor?
So the concept of what we call, so we're not using the terminology adapter here, we use the terminology DIP connection provider. It's essentially the same thing, where a third party is acting on behalf of to provide the messages. They will need to onboard onto the DIP themselves, and then within the DIP portal, you may or may not have seen a little yellow button that said assign DIP connection provider. That will then link those two organisations together. So because of the way that the security process works with global sign and the certificate management process, again, Alan, happy for you to jump in if I'm wrong here, but the way the process works, both organisations need to be registered and have their certificates, and then the DIP connects them together.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you specifically set out what steps you're expecting a nominating officer to execute?
So yeah, I think that one's a fairly straightforward one. It's the vetting and registration screen that Dave showed on the global sign screen. Essentially, the nominating officer is the person that global sign will go away and, as was stated before, will come and verify that they work for that organisation and do all of the necessary vetting and registration. That can be done by the certificate admin, as long as the details that are entered in are for the nominating officer. The process is fairly straightforward. I think the screen that was shown, but that will also be in the user guides as well. So all of the details will be in there.
Yeah, I think just to clarify that one, the details of the nominating officer are entered, but the email address that's entered below is where the response will come to from Global Sign. So that should be the cert admin.
Got a couple of questions here around DIP connection providers or DIP adapters. So do market participants using a DIP adapter use a unique domain name, or can they share the same domain name as other market participants using the same adapter?
Alan?
So the DIP connection provider will have to register a domain name that they'll use for the certs they require. And then the individual market participants will have to use their own domain name. So signings from the market participant, whereas MTLS could be from the DIP connection provider instead. So they'll both need their own unique domain names. But a DIP connection provider can use the same domain name, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Another one here was, how will this process work for DIP connection providers? As a DIP connection provider, will we need to request an MTLS cert in our own name and then message signing certs only?
Alan, is that one for you?
Can you just repeat that,
repeat the
Caitlin?
question?
Yes. How will this process work for DIP connection providers? As a DIP connection provider, we will need to request an MTLS cert in our own name and then message signing certs only.
So they'll be able to request an MTLS cert on behalf of their own company, and then the signing certificates will have to be provided by the market participant.
Okay. Because there's another related question here that I think, can the cert user be an employee of a service provider, or does it have to be an employee of a market participant?
The market participant. So that's the company that's been vetted by Global Sign, not the DCP.
I think that's for the certificates, Dave. I don't know whether this question is more generally, can they allow a user from another organisation to be assigned one of the roles within the DIP?
Yes.
I think if if the software provider is acting on behalf of and the software is an in-house piece of software, then yes. If it's coming from a DIP connection provider that's providing a managed service, then that will go through the DIP connection provider process, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Richard. Another question here, is FID02 possible for the MFA, e.g. YubiKey?
That's something we'll have to look into and get back to you, but I don't believe so, but I'll check.
Just a reminder as well that for all of this Q&A, we will write up the answers and share that document, even for those that we may not be able to cover on this session. We've got 4 minutes remaining, so I am going to see if there are other questions that have been pushed up further with likes. There's one here. In the demo, you downloaded a CER file, but requested an MTLS and signing cert. You'd expect a private key as well, which would potentially be a PFX file.
Yeah, that was the bit that I couldn't show during the demonstration. So that's the 2 red blobs that we said happen outside. So you go through the global sign activity, and then there is activity outside, which allows the file which is received, the CER file, to be converted to a PFX. And then we come back to the portal, and the CER admin can upload that PFX file, the API key and the secret.
Thank you. Another liked one here is if either SRO, ARO or TC can be the certificate admin, do we need to appoint all of those roles or just one?
I don't believe all of those roles are mandatory anyway. It can be one person, is my understanding. I'm not sure if Kevan's on the line, but just for everybody's awareness, there will be an updated version of the Code of Connections coming out, I think by the end of next week, that will be provided, and all of these updates with relevant relationships between ARO, SRO, TC, and then the certificate admin concept in the updated Code of Connections document.
Thank you, Richard. And I think that covers some other questions around the Code of Connection update. So thank you for that. There's a question here. Will there be a future webinar for obtaining your private and public keys for digitally signing messages?
I'm sure we can set one up where we give an example. The process for creating your private key will depend on the market participant or the DIP connection provider. However, we can do a demo of how we do it.
Thank you. Can 2 organisations share the same MTLS certificate?
Nope.
Will the market participant need to get a certificate themselves, even though only the DIP connection provider cert will be used to connect to the DIP?
For signing, they will need to create a certificate for that purpose only. And then the DIP connection provider will use their own MTLS certificate for connections.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point just to make sure everybody's expectations are managed, that even where participants are using a third-party DIP connection provider, they will still need to go through the onboarding and still need to go through this process.
Thank you. Apologies, there's questions here about the Q&A. Yes, that will be published. A question on the guidance and the date when it's coming out. I think it should be coming out within the next couple of weeks. Is that right, Richard and Dave?
Yes, that's the plan.
Yeah, so both,
yeah. Go
so
ahead,
both the user guide and the updated Code of Connections document we expect to be out, I think by the close of play next week, if off the top of my head.
Thank you. Just realised we've got to time. We're at 1:15. Thank you so much for all of your questions. There's a number here, and apologies for those that we couldn't get to in time. As said, we will publish the Q&A and you'll get a notification through the clock, but it'll be on the collaboration base and the website, as well as the recording from this meeting. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to our presenters today.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye just
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.